Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Changing Shapes podcast. I'm your host, Tom Horak. Today's guest is Amy Daroukakis. Amy is a cultural strategist who has been in the business for over 20 years. She's helped huge brands, any ones that you can imagine, from LVMH to Google, and she's been facilitating the understanding of cultural shifts that are happening. And the unique thing that Amy brings is not just her incredible humanity, but also her insights into the globe, how everything is changing around the world, and allows us to see beyond the things that we're normally exposed to because she just has such a broad perspective. She's lived on all six continents in so many different countries. And yeah, she just completely redefines what understanding culture means. In this pod, we discuss the future of AI and culture and the future of human connections and why the best insights come from getting lost on purpose. So let's get into it. All right, here we go. Welcome, Amy. So good to have you on our podcast. So good to speak with you. I was
Thank
just
you.
saying offline briefly how much I respect your work and how you just make insights easy to understand. And I've learned so much from you over the years. So it's such a huge pleasure to have you as one of our first guests on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining. Yeah,
Pleasure.
let us know where we're finding you today and how you've been.
Yeah, so I'm waving from Brighton, and I figured out that I have a polyamorous relationship with cities because I have a husband in Berlin I sometimes see, and then Athens. So that's why the Tom's question is a valid one. And then I'm in Asia for 3 months, starting in April. So it's a fair question.
Amazing, amazing. That sounds really great. And yeah, starting off, would you like to do a quick intro to as to who you are, what your background is, and what you've been working on recently?
Yeah, sure. I the way I tend to describe is I get paid to be curious for a living. I mean, it's the best gig you could ever have. What that curiosity looks like takes many different forms. I could work on a television uh, channel on the future of true crime for them or the cultural zeitgeist of AI. I did that for a tech brand for a year. Could be a new airport for 2050, toothbrush technology, private membership program for millionaires in Mykonos. I do a lot of work in the 0.01%. I think because I don't want anything from them, they really like talking to me. There's a whole podcast into wealth right there. And then most recently, I'm taking the trend industry to task, and I've pointed at all the things that we've been talking about in the dark, in the light, where 90% of trend reports come from 10 cities. And I can say this with assurance because I've been collecting globally a massive open source file for the last 5 years. We tend to have about 250 of them. And every year I've kept saying we need to become less global north in perspective. And so this year I really went for it and started the culture connectors. And there's 59 countries within the network. It's the first class of 25. And then we have 25 human truth specialists that are cross border in their expertise. So it's experts in loneliness, grief, disability, wisdom, place, kindness, uh, you know, the whole range of human emotions, rest, movement. And then the idea is we're building an unbiased algorithm so brands can dance one per vertical. So one car company gets access to a mix of human truth specialists and country, because just because you're based in Botswana shouldn't mean you work on a project in Brooklyn. And then that's what we're building. So that's what's keeping me busy of all hours in all locations.
That sounds absolutely amazing, and what
Thanks.
incredible projects! That's fantastic. And yeah, I'm sure we might dive into some influences of those in our chat today.
Really.
I mean, yeah, maybe even the first one being AI's cultural zeitgeist. You just said you've spent time studying that in the last year, and I mean, from your research, what surprised you the most about how society is reacting to AI's growing influence, and sort of what are the cultural shifts and emotional undercurrents around AI that brands, companies, and creators haven't fully grasped yet? Would you say?
Yeah, well, I can tell you the evolution because it's been around for decades, but there was that tipping point, which was 23. And I literally have never seen anything like it in my entire career, because I was working on a tech brand for, it was a smartphone, and we were testing the comms and what were all of the elements of the phone in 3 different markets, including Germany. And this was in November and December of 22 at the tail end. And the outroar of do not mention AI. We couldn't put it in comms. It felt too tech heavy in language. And so we were very steered by the consumer base of like, don't talk about AI. That's not actually what is going to drive my attention. So there was no plans for the communication of that product to mention anything about AI, even though it was the root of what it was made with. 2 months later, there was the brand's earnings call, and they mentioned AI 45 times. So the speed of adoption, and when I tell you the comms for that product that's now it's been on the market, it's one of those big ones, it's all about AI. And so our embracing from a commercial perspective was super fast. From a consumer base, it was super intriguing, right? And a lot of it is still done in the dark. We are in an interesting tipping point of hype and helpful, where are we? So the helpful is it's interwoven into so many different places. The hype is where every company and their mother has said that AI is the cornerstone and the heartbeat of their brand, right? To the point where when I was doing the trend report this year, like the file, I should say, I was like, can I mention that I do an AI clasps? We test the tires with AI, where we, a lot of people, this is a corpus that people can trace. It's very hard to find traceable corpuses. So the corpus is the body of data, and a lot of it's been stolen. A lot of it's been taken. A lot of it's very, very biased, which I know we're going to talk about. So we practice with it, but this body said, if you mention, please do not, there's an honorarium in our organization to not talk about AI. So almost, I would say, we went so far into what we have said. And within my industry, I'll just say, in a lot of industries, we're not tech industries. And so we're not actually what we're doing is just like skinning ChatGPT or, any other type program and saying, it's ours. I'm also seeing within advertising that there are briefs going out now where they're saying no AI can be used, right? So there's real challenges, but then the things that we never talk about, I always call this the underexplored universes, is the eco-reality. Because say, for instance, in South Africa, we curb water usage and electricity at certain points in the day. But AI, there's nothing. But a home uses, in some cases, less electricity than training models, right? So I would just say the hype, helpful, hell no, is new. And we're going to be going down that, where also, a strategist I really admire, she said, I used a lot of it last year. I don't remember what I did with it. So meaning, if we use it so much as a crutch, you don't learn what is good. And I'm really very, very worried for junior talent. I'm not so worried about senior. So I know when to uptick and when to use AI in what works. It is a part of my tool kit. If you talk about Swiss Army knives, it is not my main crutch. And I don't get hired for that. I don't get hired for sameness. And AI, there's a flattening of that. And AI cannot deliver what culture can do, because the AI training models are not culturally rich, right? So that's why I always say we're working on culture intelligence versus AI. So CI instead of AI, because the richness is not in the data. So you're never going to find the grooves. But I think we're still in a playing mode, right? But the more people get turned away from a mortgage, can't talk to somebody at a bank, can't dispute something. we will start to crave humans again. But it might be too far because we're letting go. The exodus of humans, like the market is stalled and we're not really talking about it at all. There's a lot of in the darkness firing instead of hiring at the moment. And then there's a lot of anger around people using AI to apply for jobs. But at the same time, AI is fielding you out. So, it's another part I would just say is there is something that happens right now. It's just the Wild West, but investment in AI companies is took a downturn, right? What's happened with the $6 million abilities come from China that, the truth of the gold mine has affected the stock market kind of thing, right? When it comes to AI investment. So there's still a lot of companies that will dip their toes into industries that they have no knowledge about to say, I now have the solution because your industry ... requires an exorbitant amount of human capital. I have solved that problem. And so somebody had done this recently for AI research, like for researchers. And he was like, hot take at his own company. All right. I now save all this time and and that person no longer has to like walk through the hallways to go to in a school to talk to the teacher. And I challenged it. I was like, well, here's my cold take is you're missing the micro expressions of people's faces. You are now setting yourself up for the AI research to be answered by an AI human, because now we can be perfect for any survey, right? So nobody trusts surveys anymore because they're not actually done by humans. So the AI researcher is talking to the AI human, which is then going to funnel it into the AI employee. So we're just in this cycle of not even about dismissing us. We have over exaggerated what it can do. We've thought about how my piece of the pie gets easier, right? I can write better. But what happens when your piece of the pie touches mine, touches yours, and we're no longer even part of the conversation? That's where I start to actually get very, 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 very worried.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, just to riff off that a little bit, I mean, it's so interesting to see that, when it comes to like email conversations, right? And you might be having a heated email conversation about something with a colleague or a client. And I've recently come to notice in a couple where I feel like, well, normally I would go to a colleague and just say, oh, could you just check the tone of what I've written here or something? And just to, you want to get out of your head. And now it's kind of, it can be easier to just get some feedback from one of the models, which, you can, I don't have to keep bothering somebody about, oh, can you just check this email? Like, you don't want to do that all the time, because then I've employed somebody to be checking my emails, which would be great, but, or to just sense check things. And, it would be great if we were sitting in an office and I could ask those questions quickly, but you sort of don't want to always do that. And, but then we come to this point where, well, then the person who's receiving the email might be doing the same thing. So we're just like, so what the next escalation of that is, well, I'll just have my AI agent talk to your AI agent and we'll just let them sort it out and come back to us with results. And is that more efficient or better? Because it feels like an atrophy of a skill of human interaction. And the other thing I've noticed recently, and I'm not saying these two things come together, but I love talking to people in shops and cafes and restaurants. Like, so if I'm interacting with a cashier, I genuinely want to know how's their day and have just a nice interaction. I work remotely, so I have few. So those are my few moments of real human interactions.
Same.
And people respond quite well to those. But one of the things that everybody across the board, from like our local supermarket and corner store right up to, I was getting my car fixed, and one of the car dealers there was having the same chat with me, was saying that they're noticing a shift in people's skills of communicating about things that might be difficult. And at the same time, we could have an AI agent that has a voice and, can have our voice using this, training through a podcast, and then phone up and do it for me in a way that they're briefed on.
And it just feels like that dichotomy is growing in a way, which is kind of interesting place to be in.
Yeah, and we've been talking about digital twins for years now, and the digital twin is us, right? And it's going to happen, but all of this is also choice. And I always say this around futures is we do have a place in the yes or the no. And, the example I always use is an early morning, I was at the airport in Berlin, which has taken out a lot of humans to begin with. It's a horrendous airport. So they never really factored in that humans were ever going to use the airport. Let's be honest. But there was one sole woman there, and she kept directing everyone to go use the machines, go use the machines, go use machines. Or you could go to her. And I was like, I'd like to check in with you. She's like, you could use the machine. I was like, I'm making a choice that I would like you to still remain here. And if you keep pushing everybody, you will no longer remain here. And she kind of got it. I went, this is my stance in saying I do want human touch points. And we are seeing the implications from an economic perspective. You see this within grocery stores. So a lot of grocery stores are starting to reconsider what was the cost of putting technology in for all the touch points. Okay, there's a different consumer that now comes. There's different shopping behavior. Theft is at an all-time high. Violence is at an all-time high. Microaggressions are at an all-time high because when they finally get to a customer, people are angry. We see this also within what is on every single, specifically in the UK, because it's all about being polite, right? They'll say, please be nice. Please be nice. Because we have learned poor behavior. But it's not new. And there has been studies done around like young boys talking to Alexa. And what happens when we've made all this technology very female centric. And then you'll go, Alexa, da 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 da. Our tone changes the way we talk to technology. So now I've started to train myself to say thank you when I use something. Just to keep. So I would say maybe that's a lesson we can all learn is to still evoke the same human behaviors if we're going to use technology because of the run through back to human. And again, like I'm 44, so I'm at the crux where I'm as curious as I was at 24, but I'm 44. To be 24 and dating right now and to be a bartender serving at a bar, they're teaching people how to, like, you should talk to each other. Right. We've put up so many barriers, and that is one of the core things with AI is it interweaves more and more into our life. Those become habits, which become new patterns, which has become the way we live. And if we habitually strip out all of the human elements, and like, that's why I know I will always have a job. I will have a job because I'm supposed to find the edges of things. I'm supposed to find the rub. I'm supposed to find the uncomfortable moment, the thing that feels different versus same. And all of my peers at the moment, in terms of $1 billion industry, are offering same because they've really scaled up their AI. They've pushed out humans. They're selling the exact same data that you could get, but they paywall it, but so my number one advice is be somebody that is accustomed to using technology, but human enough to know when not to use it. So to find that balance is so core, and as we, consciously making choices as to things. So some things, so for instance, when I was trying to, get all the flags for the 59 countries, and I had seen somebody human pick the wrong flag in my industry where it was bad, people were like, that wasn't the UAE, that's Sudan. I used AI to make sure I had all the right flags. So for me, that was the right lift. But in order to find all the countries, that was human. I chose them. I've chose the questions. I've interacted with them. My message was very human. They said yes because a human asked. So I would say like that's the counterpart. And the last thing I would say is I'm experiencing this in real time, probably more so than others in a very real way, in terms of somebody I know created a synthetic human researcher called Amy. and has been feeding my data. And they're not feeding the trend report file, they're feeding my communication and my tone. So that, and when I was told it, it was like, I didn't actually know how to react. And he was kind of saying it in I feel a bit guilty. So there was obviously, he felt like he was taking something from me too. But the thing I said to him, and I will say this the day I die, is you think I get hired because of all the data, because I'm a big, I share, massive share, community builder kind of person, bring people together, teach them something, is I get hired because I asked how somebody's divorce went. Like, I don't get hired because of all the insights I know. I get hired because I'm the most human version of myself, and I come a little messy and enable people to feel messy, right? To be authentically themselves, and I present myself in that way too. So a friend who works within the field, she was like, it'd be a really interesting conversation for you both to be interviewed about, the why, and I'm not ready for that because I still don't know how I feel.
Yeah.
But maybe that is a great podcast.
Well, that's really interesting. And I mean, yeah, I was thinking about that when prepping for this call. I mean, I also was reading how you got together with other Blue Flame thinkers, Sian Lee and Gonzalo Gregori and Yolanda Carvalho to create your collection of these incredible insights and democratizing those insights so that they'd be more accessible for people, which I think is an amazing project. But also I read that people are feeding those into LLMs and using that data to then, to interact with them, which I think on the one hand could be really exciting because you're making the data and information, you can query that and you can bring it to life. That sometimes, I mean, I find if there's lots of items to read and in a short amount of time, it's, blame it on too much social media consumption or whatever, but the attention span is hard. But where if I can interact with data and information, it could be easier to use. But at the same time, feeding that into there and then getting the AI to do my homework, to find what are the insights that I didn't see, can feel not just like cheating, but also not exercising that muscle of thinking about these things and potentially missing things that an AI model might not see. But even if it were perfect and were to see things, then we're outsourcing everything. And I think having the lived experience of a human and interacting with information is extremely valuable. But do you think there's a space where you could use AI to, similarly to how a pathologist will be looking at cells and trying to see if there's pattern recognition, to see if there's a disease or a cancer that they might miss, but there's also things that the AI won't see. So actually AI plus a pathologist might be have more insights than just one. But is there something similar in the more in cultural insights and strategy where that
definitely
makes sense?
Yeah, so I just recently have been using a tool called Spring. So it's a paid service. And the idea with it is it brings ideas. It's not about telling you. And when I did the test with them, I said, well, let's try sex, because sex is a really important barometer as to how much information. And also when I did the cultural zeitgeist for this tech brand, every presentation every month, I'd go, well, let's talk about sex and crime, because those are the earliest adoption of all technology, right? So that's where we're going to see fringe movements when it comes to culture, is what is the adoption? How much are people using? And a room full of tech nerds, it's quite fascinating too, right? It's spices anything up. So I asked to kind of test. And one of the things it brought is it showed brands that were counterbalance brands, kind of weird kind of symmetry, pairings to kind of just push your thinking. And one of them was what is that platform where you test yourself? It's it was a mental health app.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Happen. I just started with an H. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, oh, damn, that's great. That's great. My brain just went, boom, because I think there's a real opportunity to do sapiosexuality type. We are having sex way less than we ever have. we are being around bodies less than we ever have. But the mind, like female porn is like through the roof in terms of sales. Forget about men, just romance novels. And so that opened up that pathway to go, actually, I think there would be an amazing opportunity to pitch this to Headspace. That was the one. To pitch this to all of the dating apps that shares are tanking right now. You know, they're at like 30% market decrease. Some of these big ones like Match.com. We saw what Bumble did with trying, like, you know, they keep messing up their comms because they just do not know how to connect with this audience. But what about if it's connecting with yourself and the things, because we are also having a high propensity to have AI relationships, you know, the her reality. I know, you know, I find this really fascinating about the idea of piping in the text messages of the ex-boyfriend you really loved, but wasn't the right one, who speaks differently than the one that you're in love. You know, like human nature and technology are amazing playgrounds. So I would say that technology in that instance, it gave me the opportunity to spark that pushed my thinking, and then it kind of opened up new pockets of doorways. I've been more obsessed with algorithms and trying to break, you know, we're going to talk about this, but like breaking through the barriers of algorithms. So I was like, well, how about I spin that so that I want to become unbiased in my selection with some of these culture connectors. So I will use an algorithm in order to mix up so I become less biased, because I think there's a biasness. So that I'm finding that the technology that we're living and breathing so more, like it's just everywhere. There's just more of a topical, it's in the zeitgeist, all of these things is kind of like feeding in. And I'll even say that when I showed somebody who I was building and they're like, this is great. This is bigger than you think it is. You need to have so many traceabilities, because we're basically building a human internet, right? Like with fresh data every year. And he's like, the traceability. And I was like, I feel okay with our industry, kind of. He goes, it's the hedge fund. So then that's why I created an algorithmo, which is the Greek word for algorithm, which is my center point of how I see the world. So what I'm saying is the technology footprint has just influenced it. And I'm not the only one as to like the decisions we're making, how we do our work, how we make decisions of what we're going to eat, how we talk to each other, how we try and get somebody's attention in terms of dating, what we seek out. It's the inbred. But I think we're also scared as hell with this technology. We all saw that front row. We're scared. And tech as religion, this is the first year I saw people going against the doctrine, right? Because if you think of tech as religion, you didn't really go against it, right? Like we were like the altar of all being. And then we've seen what this midlife messery, I'm not even going to swear here, like the midlife crises that are unfolding with these tech bros who just have all the money in the world and 18-year-old self-esteem. And so what we're getting is that mix, all the money in the world and 18-year-old self-esteem. And those are why the services we have look the way they do. You know, the imprint of AI, there's been no call to action on their part to make it more diverse. We have to make that call, because they're not. Look it, they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way you put that. I mean, and I think the question of bias, and I mean, it's one thing I'd want to double tap on, because, you know, a lot of your work, I think I don't think I know anybody who has looked deeply into cultures, and so many different cultures and countries as you. And, you know, you've noted correctly, whether AI or not, in terms of the trend work that's done, is that there's too much emphasis on the global north, and, you know, AI being based on information that's online is inherently going to be biased, even though it's sold as this objective thing that has objective information. And I mean, obviously, I'm sure you see those cultural biases being output in AI. And, you know, is there anything that we can do to work against that, to make AI better? Or on the flip side, like, can it can AI actually be a tool that helps sort of surface underrepresented voices? Although for me in my head, I almost can't see that because it only knows what it knows. Or, will it just become this snake that eats itself because it starts to, I can see how so much more content, like even I think Gary Vaynerchuk was saying that like that AI influencers will do to influencers what influencers did to the past media.
Definitely.
And so all of our content is just going to be this AI generated content that's feeding itself. And then I think there's a huge value then in the offline, right? So businesses that have all their information offline, people who create the offline will just increase in value. And like, where is it heading? Like, do we want AI to just eat everything and then be maybe less biased, or should we leave it where it is and use it for what it is? And I think I've lost my question there a little bit, but there's all of these items out there.
Yeah.
How do they interplay?
There's a few different things. If we look to the big five or big three, or, it depends on that moving list when it comes to tech. If we look for them to provide any assurance or any variety or any real sense of a worldview, we'll never get there. We're just never going to get there. It's not to their economic advantage nor personal interests. We've seen it in real time. So I think point of difference when it comes to AI will be the biggest, like, is your data set different than others? Is it been cross-checked for AI slop? Because we're at a 30% threshold and probably even higher as to what the internet is now made of is AI slop. So we're like the dazzle is getting dull pretty quickly. So I would say, and there's amazing work, one of the women from Ingrid, who does our Afrofutures, she was talking about black LLMs. The amount of ingenuity going on within 54 countries, because Africa is not a country. There's so many ways in which you could cut the cloth differently when it comes to, you would have to stop pushing out diversity and inclusion. You'd have to stop, like not victimizing, trolling, So some of the greatest brains have been ones that have pushed out because they're speed bumps of speed, right? Because it's a race to profit. But the profit is not endless. We saw what happened with China. We're seeing that people are taking autonomy and creating their own tool sets. So I would say if you compete in the same old rules and old tropes of anything, where it is an industry in which can be replaceable, it's a lot of them. We will see more the rise in blue collar workers over white collar. I always talk about what we can do I use that example a lot because we have somebody who speaks for class, and blue collar is the future of white collar, right? In terms of growth and who has money. Poland will have a higher GDP than the UK within a decade. So, undervalue, the brain drain is going to look very different to brawn. So that's really important, is that new trades and skill sets, because even people that are graduating with science and tech degrees right now, they're not getting jobs. So they're going to start to really question where are pockets of money and where are sustainable money. And I think we're going to see even just the continued evolution away from traditional university degrees and stuff, which is great. So there's that part with it. And then the technology itself is going to reach its own kind of like point. So I think those are two core things. Does that help? You had another part in that question. You can remind me. It's okay. If not, we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think what can we? I mean, sort of what's the way that we can combat that the cultural bias in a way? Like, is there?
There is a couple brands and agencies that are starting to question, because I think we know it. There's an awareness, right? Like there's a website called The Other Side of the World, which talks more about global South in terms of news coverage. And The rest of the world, that's what it's called. And, they early on, they tested all of the Mid-Journey. And I mean, when you type in Mexico and everybody comes out as a sombrero, America didn't fare that much better. They looked basically who had voted, right? Like the troops of bias are really core. And even Grayson Perry, who's an artist, he did this amazing workshop. So he's always about experimentation himself. And so I went to one of his live shows, and he did class systems within the UK, and they were bad. Like they were like lower class was a heroin addict on the street, like literally a guy like on the street. Like, so he ended up he was like, I can't even kind of keep showing you this anymore. So he turned everybody into a cat, like to kind of just like bring humor into it. But the point was made that these tropes are not helping our already insane biases we have. I mean, the point I will make until I'm blue in the face is like cultural diversity, new ways of thinking has economic multitudes of benefits. It's not just like good for business, it's better business. You can open a new market shares, your messaging lands better. The product feels like a closer in market fit. Ingredients are much more relevant. There's so many reasons. And so what LLMs currently do is they are not prepared for a global market fit. They're majority fit, right? They're same. So if there's ways of injecting in nuance and culture and what are the other data sets, but also, even we don't even have data that was never collected, right? What do you do with that? Because you think of like Native American history, like we wiped out full data sets of knowledge. And so then, it's a fascinating, if you look at AI as a window to what we value, think about it as the world's biggest textbook of what has been featured. And we have a very narrow view as to who were the winners, who were the losers, who we dismissed, and who we never even acknowledged, right? We're seeing that and we're feeling it. So I think in some ways it's kind of good for us to question and go, the majority of this is created by a 30-year-old white guy in Silicon Valley. This is his ideal of the world, is this. I do have hope, but I don't have hope for people that are just looking for the finished profit. Guess what? Because of what happened within China and how it just tanked the AI investment market because of the speed and what can be done for less money, there's still questions with it, right? With deep space is that you have to build a bit better. Like any startup, there has to be a point of difference. And, if someone's willing to put in cultural edge for competitive advantage, I think that would be a good investment. But, it depends on where the money sits, right? And who makes the decisions.
Yeah, I think part of it, part of my hope is as well is that it's like, while it is centralized in terms of who's creating these tools and training them, there's also an economy behind it, right? So now that Google search has gone like not down completely, but there is a dent in the market share for Google because people are now, not everybody, but people are starting to now ask certain questions to GPT rather than looking it up. And I've been using Google more and more for what are the opening times of this store, or like really clear factual items that I need to just look up that are just these small data points. But when it comes to slightly, deeper questions of wanting to find more resources and things like that, I have been using GPT a bit more. So my use of it is changing, of, finding things online. But I think I sort of, so there's that side, and therefore businesses will now not be optimizing for search engines, but they're also optimizing for AI and LLMs to be, searchable, findable, and come up that in that one answer that I get, rather than the list of answers, which has a whole other set of concerns around it. They'll be optimizing for that. And there, I sort of always wonder that there's certain businesses that benefit from being stealth and offline and not having their information on there, culturally, is there benefit for, or is it better for everything to exist in these LLMs and for them to be trained on quote unquote everything, or to be as unbiased as possible? Or can it be leveraged? And I think that then there's a topic about authenticity as well, which I'm going to pause and circle back to that in a minute. But yeah, that dichotomy interests me, of the power of being offline as well, that it's not just a negative.
No. I think that is going to be, I mean, it is a growing market. It's growing in terms of the experiential economy of offline, of let's meet all together and play board games. Let's meet 6 strangers and have dinner. Let's have the unexpectedness of the stranger thing. The fact that I've done it, so take that with privilege. I will never in my entire life ever go and look at a sunset in Santorini again, right? Do I really want to stand with another million people? Does the island want you to stand with another million people? No. But LLMs will still serve you up the Santorini sunset, right? It's the hidden nuggets that are still really important. And I think we're becoming much more protective. And I find data poisoning very fascinating. So MIT did some work, and you saw it in real time in the UK, where restaurant reviews, people were like, stop going to our favorites. And they told everyone to go to this steakhouse in central London. That's behavior of saying, I'm going to rig this system so you don't get the best. And we're all I've been there with everyone else. Street cred is very over, right? You're not even, because of the way the algorithms are, you're not even seeing your friend's feed anymore. So you're not getting the dopamine hit of I went and did this thing. So I think we are in a point where hopefully there is a self-reflective moment. And there's been different ways of which we talked about it. Digital detoxes. Well, that doesn't work, right? The idea of just complete curbing of everything. No. But, people are reading more books than they ever have, but they're finding those books on TikTok, and they're finding communities. So hybrid is important, and micro communities are important to be found online. It's just the way they gather. And I'm in Brighton. I'm in the town of micro communities. There was just a Vespa rally, but it's all the guys that have 50 lights on their Vespas. That's a subculture of a subculture of a subculture, right? It's mod bikes. Yeah. And then next week will be the truck rally. And then we will always want to find our ilk. We are in a loneliness epidemic globally, across the board. Places that you think would never talk about it, it's becoming a hot topic in China. Meaning the evolution of where we discuss hard things is getting more and more important and talked about. So we want to connect with each other. Do not dismiss that we don't have this ache, and it's becoming harder. I think we got to connect with our friends to a certain extent, but even the tech, as I said, has kind of gotten in the way. It's kind of if you think about it, it's you're just I feel like I've never seen what they've been up to in months, because you didn't get served their thing, right? So if you didn't get the fix of the virtual friend, the physical friend becomes all the more important. And there's a massive conversation going around. That's one of the big mega trends that I'm covering at the moment, of friendship and the value of friendship, and the amount of women that are going, okay, I tried it twice. I think for the next one, for my retirement years, I'm going to go all in with my friend and buy a house. I think I have a better shot with the person I've known for 30 years to plan the last 20 with my, therapist, Esther Perel. They're doing therapy sessions around friendship. So I would say that the renaissance of friendship and how to become better friends, which is an offline activation, right? As much as it is online, is really important. So we're in this really fascinating kind of dog sniffing each other part of the world right now, where we're not getting the same dopamine hit. We can now do things a bit quicker. Doesn't mean we use all the tools. We use one, which is always amazing to me. There's so many million tools. you assume that the average person utilizes all these things. They don't. They may use some of the basics. So, it's very fact. Yeah, I just find human behavior incredibly fascinating. What we say and what we do are very different things. But what you're going to say?
Yeah. It's really, I think it's really fascinating what you're saying. And I think do you have time for 3 more questions? Would that be okay?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have 2 that I want to lead out with, but there's one more that's kind of been pressing around sort of authenticity and originality. And I was just thinking that, there's news coming out of how these models are helping science and progressing us forward in a way that we haven't been able to. There's, in my industry, in tech and coding, how they've been, vibe coding being this new thing that like the word that just rose out of nowhere in 2 weeks, and now everybody's talking about it. And it being really this progress for something interesting that is sort of driving us forward, maybe to sort of as a catch-all description of it for me. But in terms of creativity, that always feels like this really human thing. And my background in art and photography, where my measure of success was how deep can I reach into my soul and present something. That was the level of success. Compared to, as a tech CEO, my measurement of my success is daily active users and return on investment. It just feels like I can square that one, but in terms of authentic creative culture, I love the Grayson Perry example you mentioned, and I'm going to have to look that up after our session now. But are there any other sort of genuinely new and exciting AI interactive, creative, sort of creative endeavors that had AI somehow involved with them that were surprising and are worth celebrating it for? Because I think there's a lot of resistance towards it and a lot of concerns, but also I'd love to celebrate the things where it does bring out the real cultural, the real human connection and creation. Did you see anything else that you'd mention or want to double tap on?
Well, I'd say that AI, again, is embedded into all different places. We don't just necessarily acknowledge it. So I would say that TikTok's algorithm has had one of the biggest impacts on culture in the longest time, because, I'm a fan. Not everyone is a fan. And I think, the thing is, it serves you up your interest. And it's so fascinating because there was a guy, it was like a TikTok on a TikTok saying yeah, I keep getting served up all this gay men's porn. It's but that's it's meaning, your interest is what dictates what you get served, right? So it also is a very good indicator of human behavior. And what I've liked about it as a platform is the discoverability. They've nailed it really well. That's why it was so coveted, and why we saw what happened with the U.S. We also saw what happened when they left. So I would say that that kind of no other social tool has provided such a messy human to win, because the other ones were really about perfection of the grid. The hot take person, the humor. I just really enjoy it as a platform. I've seen lots of failure. I've seen lots of museums kind of try and use the technology, and we've seen ad campaigns created. We've seen a few years ago where there was an entire cultural calendar in Germany that was fed into, and they celebrated breaking of the glass for KFC, which was the start of the Holocaust. But so human parts are important. It's a fascinating one around art, and I do not like Midjourney art. I don't like the aesthetic of it. I don't like the look and feel of it. And I know a few arts, but then this amazing woman Samara, I'll send you her work after. The way she looks at art and AI artistry is one of the best I've ever seen. She is hands down one of my top most like inspired person when it comes to AI and artistry. And the way she talks about it is AI it could be very tech centric, or it could be modeled under the Silk Road methodology, which was all about like interconnection of change in art. And the way she got really into AI artistry was that she did all the amazing windows at Anthropology, which are very like body, physical demanding. Anthropology is known for like these beautiful windows of 6,000 butterflies cut and all this crazy stuff. So she did all the whimsy and did all the creative direction. Her body couldn't take that anymore. So she trained into a new medium to create new artifacts for the future. And so her AI looks very different, and she brings people on a journey. And so I've seen, and I'd say that the biggest AI artistry that I really love have really pushed past the tropes of visual identity and cultural identity, and actually are reclaiming new tropes of new cultural identity and creating new artifacts. And, but there's a part where I don't like it when a brand creates a senior citizen of 60 that looks like a teenager of 20 that they've just like, when they could have hired the 60-year-old. So again, it's the same thing. Know when to use the technology. When is the right time? And so there's a lot more mishaps and the scrutiny. Oh my God, we're always looking for like the wrong foot or the wrong elbow, right? Like we're very sensitive to something feels out of place. So I don't know if we're going to completely be completely accepting. I think the novelty of the model that makes now $1 million, the AI like influencer, from a brand perspective makes so much sense. So they're gonna push. So that's a point where, again, choice of the future, which we want to have and partake in. That from a business perspective, to not employ a human in all elements is a value set, right? It's our choices too. But I don't know. I think sameness is like my favorite word of that compared to different. We seek out different. That's where we go, oh, I never thought of it that way. That's what makes you want to buy something. Within the fashion industry, they were one of the first to go downhill real quick when it came to tech and decision making, because we stripped out creativity. And then we'd go, this is Lee Edelcourt, she's a futurist, and she talked about this. She goes, you figured out that yellow sold really well last year, and that a pocket did well too. And you put yellow with the pocket, and then you're surprised nobody wanted to buy yellow in the pocket, right? You just Frankenstein the things that you thought did very well. And we've seen this with like mixologist competitions between a bartender and a machine. It doesn't land. It's never, we like the messiness of the unexpected, the storytelling. And the other thing I would also just say about all of this is the further you advance in your career, this is as much for juniors as well as seniors, is I get hired to be less noise, to bring less noise into a room than to bring more. Like, I'm not bringing in a disco, and I've turned down jobs with agencies and I've quit where they created a more noisy environment. As you progress and you talk to the higher up, the smaller the room you go into, the higher you go up. It's a 1-pager. It's 3 bullets, right? So if those comes directly from technology only, those 3 bullets, first of all, there's nobody to blame. We always are going to need a human to fire. And also, there's no story behind where you got the data, right? So it's important.
That's super insightful. And I think maybe to sort of leading towards the end, I really love to end these conversations with the next generation in mind. And I have 2 questions. One will be the final one, but this is the second to last question, just around sort of looking ahead, how you imagine the role of a cultural strategist evolving in the next 5 to 10 years with the setup with AI that we have in the mix. And in a way, like what is that role becoming? And do you see, AI is obviously going to be in the mix, and is it something that will be turning into AI curators, or will there be a backlash, and should it be more human? Or maybe a better question is, what are the skills that people should focus on? Because I also feel for juniors in my field that it's just vastly changing, and there's certain tasks that would normally could go to a junior, but also an AI might be there to do it to some degree, and that might be quicker, easier, cheaper, whatever, as as we see. So I think it is, I worry about that, across all industries, about just juniors not being included in the room and in the conversations. So
Definitely.
what do you think is important to pass on as important skills, and how to look forward, and what does the future of your work look like?
In order to protect yourself, you have to, this is for all of us as we move forward, is you have to be the most human version of yourself. You have to be the thing that they want to hire. And I don't care if you're in an office or you're independent. Both of those, that is the only protection. I am the most Amy I can be. I say the thing. I'm willing to talk about uncomfortable things. I talked about this summer who I went on, I took parental leave to take care of an aging parent. I'm willing to kind of put myself out there, and it opens up dialogue. I know from experience the limitations of what my brain can do. And what I worry about with technology is it can give you all the answers, but you're not supposed to be the person that finds all the answers. When we talk about cultural strategy, that's really, really important. Because if the internet can give you the answer of everything, first of all, why are they going to you? You're a middleman then. So you're actually you're pushing yourself out. And this recently was a conversation with somebody in my industry where he went, if you're just going to regurgitate AI, why am I hiring you? I'm hiring you because of what your thought process is, how you see the world. What do you think? And because I've trained and I continue to train, and I know my limitations, that's the reason Culture Connectors exists. Because I, as a white lady in my 40s, know the limitations of what I can answer with authenticity and what is not the voice that should be mine. And if I just relied on technology and then regurgitate it through my voice, that's inauthentic. And it's not. It's biased again. I become a cultural bias of bias, because am I supposed to speak to somebody's lived experience because I read it in ChatGPT that I can then speak with authenticity? It's a very different experience to come from somebody of that culture and that experience. And I mean, a great example is I was in Lisbon and I was out for dinner with a friend, Yolanda, who does the big trend file with me. She's like, I'm going to take you out for dinner, but I'm not telling you where we're going because I don't want anyone to know about it. So I'm like, if I promised not to tell anyone what the restaurant is, that's how you also preserve culture, right? That was like, fair. So went to her favorite restaurant. And then we went for her favorite place for ice cream. And there was a lot of men out with children. The entire restaurant packed with men with kids eating ice cream with their children. And I'm looking around going like, this is amazing. Like, what a Lisbon is way more liberal than I thought. Like, this, there's no moms here. This is so great. After school, maybe they go out for ice cream. Turns out it was Father's Day. It was Portuguese Father's Day. But if I landed like an alien, which happens with cultural researchers, and I brought that artifact back, it's not accurate. It's not culturally, it's like my interpretation of what I was experiencing, and it was wrong.
Yeah.
So the more we can understand our bias, technology doesn't give us the rub enough. It gives us what we think is the answer. It doesn't even tell if it's the right answer. So learn to be the most authentic you as possible. Play with the technology, but do not make it into a crutch. Know that in order to protect yourself, you have to have a point of difference. Also, know your own biases and then find different ways of challenging them. And, you know, I get hired more often because I'm not the right person for this. I know exactly who that person is. They'll come back to me because, you know, at a different point, because there's a quality assurance. You know, people are getting hired in the network because I've given them like a Zagat rating, right? People are getting projects in Nigeria, but that's because I developed my own voice, that there's an assurance level, that this was probably another great person. So, you know, thought leadership and whatever that looks like in your own way is really important in order for self-protecting. And I will tell you, if you start to get louder on LinkedIn, which I see of people, and I know who's using AI versus their own voice. We all do. It's just, there's hot takes and, you know, you just know, like, there's such telltale signs, and it's a fast fix, but, you know, I've now written posts for 7 years now, like really consistently on a regular basis for 5. I know the rhythm of my voice. I know the ebbs and the flows of how I like to tell a story. I know where the pauses. I know where I put bold words versus, you know, I know what is a good day for me to post something. Like there's strategic in being your own self too. You know, I'm playing with the technology. I have to play if I want to win against the algorithms. But if I started, and I did do one once where there was somebody I really admired. And I was like, oh, damn, I really liked it. Like, I was like, I feel like she's just like getting it. And I tried one way. Like, I was like, let me just try that style. It didn't land at all. It did not at all, because it was not. And my husband, who I sent it to, he goes, this is not you. You know, I was like, this feels more informative. Because I did somebody who we're doing PR with, she always says to me, she's like, I know what you think, but I kind of don't know what you do because I can't say any of the work I do. Right. But maybe mystery can also be what is titillating beyond the, I just landed this account, I'm so great. That's not, I don't like that. So again, play with that technology, but do not rely on it.
Yeah, that is sage advice. You've kind of answered my last question. So, I mean, my last question would have been that in your work, you know, you've seen so much and gathered so many insights from different places. If there was a story that you'd say you've gained a cultural insight that you couldn't through AI, but you've answered that already with the great story.
I've got a good end story. I can say that.
Okay, great.
So we talked about an AI one. I'll tell you about a very human one, because it's a good balance. We'll end on a human one where I was working on a museum that is in honor of, it was a pitch for a chairman of a big automotive brand in South Korea. And it is his legacy. So the museum is being recreated in honor of him. And so the pressure is huge. It cannot be a recreated building. It has to be remodeled internally. And so what happened is there was this dark space in the middle. There was a square room of nothing. It was like a dead space. And people were like, what do we do with this? And this brand is known for machinery and technology. And I was like, I've got a crazy idea. I can't even believe I'm going to tell you this crazy idea. I was like, I think we should put a robot who makes kimchi. And they were like, that's it. And the reason why it landed so well is because 15 years ago, I had been in South Korea and I'd been walking down the street, and why this matters. And there was hundreds and hundreds of women making kimchi because it was the season. It's right before winter. So the fermentation hasn't started. And so all these women, because the way in Korean is like some cultures with rice, like everyone should have kimchi. So they make it for the poor. They make it for everyone. And so every year women gather to make kimchi. It's labor intensive in an aging population. And so I stumbled across this. They thought I was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. So they start making I start making kimchi with these women. The news crews come. I'm now on the news. They invite me for lunch. We don't speak any, like, we're just like hand gestures, but I've now made friends. So it was a very memorable moment because it was unexpected, right? I learned something about culture in a way that I felt like participatory from. I was novel to them. They were novel to me. It was like a top experience landed in my brain, right? But what do you do with this knowledge? 15 years later, why it made sense in the museum is for an aging population, if his legacy is being able to make kimchi for society, utilizing machines as technology, it honored the ingenuity of the brand. It served a real purpose. It talked about the cultural change that they're going through. It was like a Mozart note of one of the best cultural insights I've ever discovered. That was 15 years later that landed and it went in the presentation. And that's to me the magic. And also like I'm leaving. Are you ready for this? I'm Vancouver from Canada. I'm Canadian, leaving my home in Greece to fly to Singapore to get on a cruise that goes around Japan on a German cruise. So that's what I'm doing this spring. That mix is why I'm really good at what I do. Really good at what I do because it's like all of that, you know? And so when I talk to a German company and they'll go, but you live in Berlin, you don't understand Germany. I'm like, I go on cruises with thousands of Germans. I know Germany better than you do, right? It's a microcosm. I'm an outsider. I'm the only Greek passport in the 7,500 person ship, right? I'm observing. I'm looking at behavior. I find it really novel. It's also like being on an ashram because my German's not great. So, you know, that's my USP. So when I say I'm a cultural strategist, it's a bit of a different narrative that's going on right now. As an industry, cultural strategy is seen through the lens of digital culture or anthropological culture. But where I can find the red threads is from going, here's parts of digital culture, parts of anthropological history is important, but here's your commercial opportunity. So I'm telling you, if they did that in that museum, the press, right? The gift shop, the smell, it's quite intense. So that AI couldn't have found. Do you know what I mean? And but because it's the story that they could then tell of how it was discovered. So this is like, you know, not to end, but on the youth as well as all ages is like, you got to get lost on purpose. I mean, that's what makes good work in any field. That's how new discoveries happen. And that's, you know, what becomes your USP. And so hopefully this helps.
It's more getting lost on purpose. I love that. That's fantastic. Yep. Great point to end our podcast. This was absolutely wonderful, inspiring, and an absolute joy. Thank you so much, Amy.
Pleasure. Thanks, Tom.
That was Amy Daroukakis, and I think this conversation left us with some big truths about AI, culture, and what we choose to value. Some key takeaways for me are the following. AI is not a replacement for human insight. It's a mirror reflecting what we value. It can help us find patterns, but Amy made it clear that AI is being trained on a narrow and biased data set, and unless we actively shape it, it will keep reinforcing the same patterns. True cultural intelligence isn't just about trends. It's about understanding the gaps, the biases, and the things that we fail to see. As a second insight, we are currently at a tipping point between efficiency and erasure. AI is making things faster, but AI highlighted how it's also flattening everything, and everything from creative work to human interactions. There's a very real risk of outsourcing our ability to think, to observe, to connect. And when AI generated content is talking to AI generated audience, where does that leave us? What are we doing? A third was that the most valuable thing we can do is to be the most human version of ourselves. And I just love that. I think Amy put it perfectly. She doesn't get hired for the insights she shares. She gets hired because she asks how someone's divorce went. And that parallels into everything that she does. The real competitive advantage isn't just knowing things, it's knowing how to connect with people in a way that AI never can, because it's not alive, it doesn't have lived experience. And that way, it can't make relationships and relate things to another. And as a fourth insight, getting lost on purpose is how real insights happen. And so, whether that's stumbling into a kimchi making tradition in South Korea or realizing that supermarket self checkouts are part of what's making customers angrier, the best cultural insights come from real world observation and not from just looking at reports. And I think that insight makes me really hopeful to what AI can help us do. Let's let it look at reports, but let us all get out and have more real human experiences. So there's a lot to sit with here, and I hope it sparks some thoughts with you about how we navigate cultural and technology and choices that we make. If you enjoyed this episode, share it, subscribe, and join the conversation on LinkedIn or Substack. Until next time, stay curious and don't be afraid to get lost on purpose.